Hello, and welcome to the last episode of the CTO Fundamentals 2 series. I'm Sorin, and I lead the engineering team at Bunny. And together with me is Cornel, Chief Platform Officer at Pentalog. Just to add some context, welcome to the last episode of Bunny builds. Sorry for that. Just to add some context, Bunny builds software as a service platforms for managing environments and is focused on improving both the productivity and developer experience for software engineers, while Pentalog provides top quality talent and know-how to support business launch and extending digital teams. Today, we'll be talking about some situations which can disappoint CTOs and things which nurture the illusion that everything is okay. And of course, how to keep an eye out for these and handle them ultimately. So a few housekeeping rules for today's webinar. We will have Cornel's presentation, and only in the end we will take questions in the Q&A section. But please don't hesitate to leave your questions on the chat so that we can address them in the end. So you can leave the questions at any time in the chat, and we will address them all in the end. So, Cornel, you have the stage.
Thank you, Sorin. Can you please allow me to share screen? I think
Sure.
I cannot.
My bad.
And yes, happy to be here with you. And this is the last episode of this season. CTO Fundamentals 2, the CTO Deception or Illusion. We've talked a lot about CTO as a privilege. We've talked about, I'm sharing my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes, everything's fine.
Full screen. Good. Okay. So we've talked a lot about CTO as a privilege. We've talked a lot about how to do stuff, how to look forward, about strategy, tactics, a better CTO. We've looked on things like CTO and the technical debt, decision making. The last time we've discussed about CTO legacy, and now deception or illusion. Just to recall, be mindful, you'll get the slides, focus on the blue areas and of course on the characters and what they do. We have again Bob. So Bob is our hero, the character that we are using. He's a CTO. He wasn't born a CTO, he became a CTO. So we had lots of sessions about it. And we've finished the last session with CTO legacy with the following highlights. The CTO job is temporary. Of course, a clear direction is required. We also need to take decisions that don't compromise the ability of future generations, so for the new CTO and for the new teams that will come after us. There needs to be a definition of CTO, what we leave behind, what we transfer to the new CTO, a decision log inspired from architecture decision record. We also need to be reasonable in what we can achieve, and others should have reasonable expectations about what we can achieve together. And we are going to talk again about it because it's important also to not leave an illusion. Get unstuck. There is a framework from Christopher Avery. We've learned about it and how to react in difficult situations, because believe me, you will have difficult situations, whatever the future brings. Experience might also hold you back. So what got you here won't get you there. And when we look at technical debt, we should look at the wider spectrum of it, from an enterprise perspective, social technical debt. So there are episodes about it. And of course, last not least, our footprint on the culture. And we finished with this slide, which was important because we asked systematically about if CTOs are happy with what they found in their new company where they act as CTOs. And they rarely say they do. And throughout these seasons, throughout these CTO fundamentals episodes, we want to correct that. We want to improve that. We want to help you in leaving something behind. So that being said, we start the episode with something which is inspired from the truth, from a real experience. So Bob is very happy and proud with the progress he achieved. And during the shareholders meeting, the investment fund, who of course invested in many companies, has also a CTO there and says, we want to ensure that everyone provide us metrics like DORA metrics and see where every company stands. Bob reacts in a very positive manner because he's happy. He scores elite with his organization in DORA metrics, so that's pretty cool for him. However, sometimes reality might be a bit different from where the idea of deception. Let's look at what Bob finds. So not too far in the past, they migrated from on-premises to public cloud. And when doing that, they changed the continuous integration, continuous deploy pipelines. And most of the important tools for quality related or things that they automated weren't migrated. They were forgotten. Tools like SaaS, Dust, Quality Gates, now they aren't there. So an important leap forward turned out to be a significant degradation of their quality delivery capability. So this is a fact. Bob is living it. Throughout his analysis, Bob understands that the team doesn't look at logs, doesn't analyze logs as often as he would expect the team to do. He also looked at the statistics and he finds 500 errors. In DORA metrics, he's elite, but there are 500 errors nobody is looking at. Nobody was aware. Or 400 errors, a lot. So this is the context. This is where Bob is. And Bob is a bit frustrated because how come he can be in elite and in a sense having so many things not happening properly and he's not aware and the team is not aware. At first, Bob experiences some sort of deception and then guilt because in the same time he did the same thing with those to whom he's reporting. So he's intrigued. The whole idea is what's missing here, because he also, this is a very DevOps kind of challenge. He was a great Dev and Ops kind of engineer, so he was capable of conducting, performing activities in both areas and achieved great results when he was a developer. So what's happening? So he has an opinion about it. He needs to look at the responsibilities, his last definition of requirements for the CTO role, and what from here could be linked with the challenge he's facing. It's not a leadership style, or maybe a bit. Translate technology to business and the other way around, maybe a bit. He kind of said things that are about the technology and which weren't true. So a bit. Co-partnering with executive is less efficient because in a sense he was straightforward and without being mindful about it, he kind of deceived a sister. Governance could be an aspect. Things that should tell how efficient we are doing stuff is not there. So it's definitely something to improve there and so forth. So he's looking at things we've seen in a better CTO in the first season of CTO fundamentals. I'm not going to all the details here, but this is how Bob reflects. He's looking back to his responsibilities and see what can be improved or who. So he has this insight that when he became CTO, he didn't know what governance means. In a sense, he was a great, competent developer and dev and ops. He was doing both, but he wasn't necessarily aware about the DevOps movement at that time. But when he changed the position, he became novice. So an important perspective in what he's doing. He knew this, but he's taking this a bit forward. He's also thinking from responsibilities perspective that whenever you change them, you require new skills that you don't have practice. So in a sense, you are kind of incompetent. Governance. He thought he was doing it. He had a definition about it. He learned from about it in the CTO tactics, and still is not enough. So he needs to improve a lot. So that's the key here. New responsibilities, new skills. No matter how good he was at the previous job, he's in a sense incompetent here. And he's also looking at things happening in his team because for opportunity reasons, for career path kind of discussions, he's also encouraging this with other team members. So people who are good in different areas, they changed the role and they became at least maybe not fully incompetent, but not competent either in different jobs. For example, a tester who became Scrum Master, a full stack developer who became product owner. Competent when they were doing their job, they shift the roles, no longer competent. So he's intrigued by this and needs to find a way to make it work better. Of course, for himself first, but also for the team, because whatever Bob learns tries to apply from a systemic perspective and with the people in his reach and under his reporting, at least. So the full idea here is not to prevent people changing the roles or going further, pulling up in their career or the hierarchy, but to do this in a responsible manner. This is important. And he finds this body of knowledge, the Peter principle, who talks about the fact that everyone is going to reach their highest level of incompetence when they switch roles. So in a sense, we move from a position to another until we are incompetent in the position and we cannot go further. And that's the final position. So it's an interesting metaphor. Of course, it's a satirical lecture, but it's insightful for Bob because there's lots of truth in this. And of course, this work was integrated in many works of very important people that developed the scientific management. So from the book, he's looking at a Gaussian curve, a normal distribution, in fact. And he says, of course, those who are super incompetent and super competent, we don't talk about it because in the organization they are quickly eliminated. But he feels like he's somewhere in median, moderately competent. And what happened to him is something related to this. He needs to improve in some fields so that he is going to be competent CTO. He's looking at the responsibilities, the latest version of it, and the priorities he gave himself. So this comes from the CTO legacy episode, where he put priorities on the responsibilities and when he will focus. But he removes the priorities and puts his level from the Dreyfus scale of skills acquisition. We've talked about it with many occasions. So Dreyfus model of skill acquisition it's a model used in learning, in teaching, and Bob has experience with it. And there is a particular scale. There's novice, advanced beginner, competent, proficient, and expert based on your experience. So it's a scale based on experience. And he's looking at things like governance. So he practiced it. Definitely not 360 degrees. Definitely with the problem he has right now, he can't be considered competent. So he's an advanced beginner. And there are other areas where he's an advanced beginner, and there are areas where he is competent. And of course, areas where he is novice. He will not be able to improve all that. He's taking other areas like engineering team, because in a sense, his illusion was nurtured by the engineering team, who said, in a sense, who indicated, who radiated a reality which was not the reality. So again, so managing engineering teams, it's a component. He was competent as a team member, incompetent as managing engineering teams. Very important. So he's looking at what is required to manage engineering teams. He's putting all the skills on a map. He has social skills, emotional skills, hard skills, and so forth. This list is not exhaustive. And he is strictly related to the component engineering teams. And of course, he can delegate a part of these responsibilities or not. Like, for example, human resources aspects, if the team is big enough, one-on-ones, yearly review, onboarding, this kind of stuff can be delegated, and that's fine. We're not going to talk about it. But in some teams, the CTO is taking care of it. In some teams, the engineering manager. In some teams, other stuff. So he did this for himself, and he's thinking, yeah, my team, those who change the role, at least need something similar, so that they are guided. So he's building this for all the roles that he has in the organization. A Dreyfus model per role, with all the skills there, so that he can map people experience, or people can self-assess their experience, and of course improve on that. Now, of course, please be mindful, note your questions so that we can handle them in the end of this session. Also, as a short announcement, so if you want to see how these kind of models of skills acquisition look like, you can go on our site at Pentalon. We are using this in assessments and self-assessments during interviews and things like this. And you can play with them yourselves. There are many there, but I've taken here which was relevant from the case that Bob has. So you can find on the site a product owner Dreyfus model, so that you can self-assess Scrum Master or DevOps with containers and things like this. Getting back to the presentation. So remember, we've talked about it. What got you here won't get you there. This is not new. In terms of skills, this is what Bob is talking about. He was competent as a developer and ops. He became incompetent as a CTO. He learned, and then there is a spectrum of skills, and he practiced, and he became more and more competent on some of them, but he needs to take care of all his skills. Then we've talked about emotional intelligence a bit. Yeah, this is also something we discussed in a better CTO. So there is a body of knowledge that you can use to work on your skills and improve on that. Not getting back to it. And in the decision-making session, we've discussed about various levels of decisions and what kind of positioning the CTO needs to have. So remember, we are talking about a problem which is Bob considers his elite in DORA metrics, and he was nurtured an illusion by the team using maturity models and technical debt visibility, the visibility over technical debt, things that Bob is using when he's doing his assessment. So in a sense, the problem comes somewhere between goals and the reviews, because somehow what triggered the degradation of the infrastructure came from a goal, which was the migration to public cloud. He's also looking at things that we've talked previously about visibility over technical debt, and he says, if there is a place where I should have seen this, the shortcuts teams are taken, like we do this and it's fine for a small period to not have all this tooling enabled in continuous deploy, but we will take care of them later in a month, in 2 months, and things like this, because we need to go further and we do this in reasonable steps. So one place where this kind of shortcuts is declared, and the only place, is the technical debt. So that's the angle of analysis Bob is taking. And he's looking at it and says, it's not the problem about how the technical debt was traced or identified, because the team is doing it already good enough. The problem comes from the fact that they didn't even think of this being a problem. So they weren't using the tools, in fact. So this is what he considers the real cause of it. So he's looking at ways of tackling with it. He needs to be mindful about cause and effect. So is it solving the cause or the effect? Because, for example, the illusion he had was the effect. Looking at technical debt, insufficient technical debt management or visibility over technical debt incomplete, that might seem a cause, but in reality, that's the effect of something else, which is the cause. And he also is looking at, okay, I will understand this. I'm going to connect with the team, but I will also need to decide on how I am going to apply the treatment. So I'm going to treat the cause, treat the effect, or do whatever. So he needs to be mindful of all these aspects when going further. So, and he's going further. He's looking at technical debt with the team. Nothing wrong there. Pretty well documented. So, but here he was working on the effect. He's looking at maturity models, things we've discussed, and things that were considered practices like we are doing SaaS, we are doing DAST, we are doing whatever, all these practices, they were marked as done, while in reality, after the migration, they weren't done anymore. So this is an interesting aspect. So he feels like it's a bit working on the cause, because things here degraded and the team wasn't aware. So how often they should look at it. There is some sort of learning and teaching here to do maturity models right. And we are going to get back to maturity models a bit later. In order to go further with the team, he's going to use a tool we've discussed, get stuff done model. So he learned a bit about the context. He's listening to the team, clarifying aspects, debating, deciding without mixing these stages. So he's not doing this in the same time. And when doing this, he's working on the cause because he's working with the team, but this is just a tool. And then he goes back to the responsibility can be trained. Why? Because he understands from working with the team that in reality, the team wasn't using this kind of stage gates, wasn't using Sonar, wasn't using SaaS, DAST. And when there was a problem, they weren't looking at it. So it's a thing of responsibility. Somehow they were expecting someone else to do it. But what did we learn previously in other sessions is that responsibility can be trained, even if it takes a bit of time. So we need to look at people in what mind stage they are in this responsibility process. Are they justifying, laying blame, denial? So, and based on this, he's acting differently so that they learn and become again responsible end to end through this process, and they understand it's part of their responsibility. And then, while doing this, because he's working on the most interesting level with the team, on things that can impact the quality of assessments that the team is doing with the maturity models, and the analysis the team is going to do based on the tools that were not used in a sense, or look at logs that the team was never looking at it. This is tightly linked with the cause, but there is an extreme of it. An extreme Bob is aware of, the tyranny of metrics. So the idea is not to measure everything, and the maturity models was never about measuring a KPI. It was more about the awareness, more about the duty of advisory, more about knowing where you are, more about not failing miserably. But they are not performance indicators or something. They are not a performance scale. Performance is the value driver, are the value drivers, the beta, revenue scale, things that you agree with your shareholders, with the executive management, things that you follow. That's the performance of the company. What maturity models help you with is not to fail miserably. That's it. So knowing how to do it well, how much investment you need to do in different areas, and know that there are things that can be done. What is the value proposition of each item in a maturity model? And ensure that if you don't do it, you assume the risk, because there's always something about risk and opportunity here. But how can that be handled? Because in a sense, we live with an illusion of stability. We live with an illusion of continuity. Maturity models, once this is done, it's done. In reality, no. Many things can degrade an item that we say is done. Continuous deploy can work today, but tomorrow there are lots of reasons, even those pipelines will stop working. The infrastructure fails, insufficient resources, a hack, many reasons, not the proper tooling, and so forth. So this is very important, and you can take this and believe scientists that in a sense there's nothing fully in your control. And some of these scientists, like Ellen Langer here, is going to advise you that even if you can learn how to be more in control of how you react at your mind state, as you learn how to be in control of how you react during strategy and tactics when things happen as they happen, but you are not in control. So this is an interesting scientist, Ellen Langer, that you can help the same things that we talked here, but at your personal and mindful level. Another aspect we've talked so many occasions is having reasonable expectations, knowing where you are, and not going with maturity models or investing in areas where you shouldn't. They are not suited for you. It's too much investment, and you cannot bear this kind of features or investments. The example here was with Bataille des Alpes, with the Battle of Alps, where we've discussed about Italy trying to conquer France, and they didn't move the needle. And we know the Germans did. And why the Italians didn't move the needle is because they were in a different league. They were playing with someone in a different league. So you might also be in a different league, and you should be mindful about the things that you can do and are reasonable for your company. And this helps a lot in not nurturing an illusion, and of course, not being disappointed about it. Another tool that we've talked about, this is very important, it's about control. We need to redefine what control means, because if we cannot have a full control, what kind of control we can have? This is an example, the bridge metaphor. So frameworks like Scrum or Kanban or LESS or extreme programming, they tell you things like this. I'm the CTO, and you are my team. So if you're using Scrum, this is a reasonable risk I can take, because I know in 2 weeks I will have something. I know even if delivering 2 weeks today, you should challenge that. You should do it daily, several times today. But living with this, staying with this framework. So you give the framework so that they can do whatever they do in your direction, and with the framework that you know it will not harm the organization. That's why we are doing. This is why you keep control. This is a way of keeping control. It's similar to parents who are on a bridge with their kids, and they say, you can run, you can jump, you can do whatever it takes. I'm here to ensure that you don't fall off the bridge. So this is what frameworks and methodologies do. We ensure that the team doesn't fail miserably. We ensure that the team doesn't fall off the bridge. So this is a way of having control. So you delegate lots of stuff, but not everything. You keep some pillars, you keep some stuff. And of course, you improve over it collaboratively, but it's your decision as a CTO. So this is a new definition of control. You are not controlling everything, and there are things people will decide and you will not be aware, but they need to know what decisions harm the organization. We've also talked about repeatability because we don't take enough time to learn from it. But there are practices. In a sense, there is this myth of, we are going to talk in a few slides, of everything is new in products development. We will get to that in a slide. But before going to that, remember, in order for your team to not fail miserably and not harm the organization when they take decisions, you need pillars, educational pillars, which are part of their onboarding, your recordings, your stuff. You check their knowledge, and you ensure they are aware. If not, they might take decisions that can harm the organization. A few episodes back, you can see about things like data sensitivity, how to take decisions in solution architecture, and things like this. So check the CTO decision-making series, technical debt episode, and things like this. And this is the myth. A myth. There are still books going out telling that, in a sense, we moved from repetitive manufacturing to unique production development. And that's true. And that's perfectly true and fine. But it's not like we need to reinvent always the same thing in terms of practices, tools, and the way we get there. Because every organization does things in a unique manner, but you should ensure they are, when you do things which are unique, those are highly valuable. You shouldn't do unique stuff in things which are less valuable. That is the place where you should use standards, practices, just do it. If there is a product that you can reuse, or a product on the shelf, just take it, leverage that. Don't invent. Your company has limited energy. Use your energy to work on the most valuable aspects of it. So you don't need to do everything in a unique manner. This is a trap. And how much we are doing unique and how much we need to reuse, it's a matter of choice and leadership for the CTO to guide their teams. But those who say we always reinvent, they are living an illusion. Even of the greatest, largest companies, they don't reinvent. They have an identity and access management. They have a logging systems. They have a CM. They have lots of infrastructure components and architecture services they need to leverage. They cannot reinvent. And if they reinvent, they are harming the organization. Don't nurture your illusion there. And of course, one but not least, the governance. Because this is eventually what nurtured Bob's illusion. Believing that he's in elite. But how relevant was that information? So how efficient are we collecting information? How efficient is that? Aren't we collecting things which are useless? Aren't we, maybe the skills of the people who are doing this, and we know for sure that in Bob's case it was the case, the skills aren't there, and responsibilities follow also these skills, and on all the layers of governance, we didn't spot that. So learning how to do governance right, it's important. But how to do governance right if you cannot dissociate, if you cannot difference what governance means from other activities? For example, if you say I'm doing innovation, that's not governance. If you say I'm doing technical debt management, that's not governance. If you say I'm looking at the efficiency of how we've done some stuff, that's governance. The cycle time. How much time did it take to implement a decision, to do something? How efficient was that? These are things related to governance. And there's, of course, we discussed in the ideal CTO, there is this body of knowledge holacracy where you can inspire a lot. It extends at maximum this knowledge, this know-how of governance. So again, if you cannot make the difference between other activities and governance, there is a very important chance you are not doing governance at all. We are doing CTO assessments a lot, and we strongly correlate CTOs who don't dissociate between these activities with inefficiency in the organization and large important opportunities for improvement. And of course, with governance comes of some indicators without going into the tyranny of metrics, but cycle time is one of the most important ones. If there is something you need to measure cycle time. Why? Because you need to ensure your cycles are short, whatever it takes. When developers say the cycle time will be longer because we need to do another step in our deploy process. When you automate something, when you write a test, when you do that to ensure that you don't increase the cycle time. You do that to ensure that you are doing in a consistent manner, not from time to time, and with short cycle times. This is why we are doing all this automation around building, deployment, and delivery. So this is very important. So we can say temporarily we will increase the cycle time because we cannot. We need to start from somewhere. We will add a step. This is manual for the moment, and then we automate it. But ensure you diminish the cycle, you reduce the cycle time in a reasonable time span. Of course, the cycle time doesn't replace the value drivers we've talked about. So those are the indicators, the key indicators. Cycle time is more a key indicator for governance. But if you don't ensure it's everywhere, you will find yourself in very inefficient ways of working because people tend to increase the cycle time. So you need someone who's keeping these cycle times short. Always observe how the cycle time evolves. There are many things to be talked here in avoiding tyranny of metrics, but also in avoiding that the cycle time is meaningless. Maybe in a different session we will get into details of that. It needs to be relevant kind of cycle time. But if you do this in a consistent manner, you will find categories of activities and compare the cycle times. And anyway, even if it's not the best approach, even if it is the most primitive approach of measuring cycle time, it will still help. And we've done a tour. If we are doing all this, there is an important chance as a CTO, you will not nurture an illusion anymore. You will live in a reality, and of course, you will deceive much less, and you will be deceived much less. There are other stuff that we could have put in here. Things like how people sometimes try to lie, but that was too emotional to in a very psychological area. Also in change management, that sometimes people similar to the stage of competence incompetence that we've discussed earlier from the Peter principle. This is a very frequent problem that people meet. For example, when you when you are in depression, it's usually because you expect to be in a state and you aren't. And most of the emotional challenges come from these problems, where you are in a state where you don't want to be, you want to be in another one, or you can't face that state. So you can go take this further even more, and there's lots of literature about it. Now, getting back to what we've discussed during the session and the highlights for the CTO and organizational line. Don't forget to measure cycle time. So I put this here because one of the last things that we've discussed is very important, but value drivers are the ones that matter. Huh? If you don't see this as a CTO, you're in trouble. If you don't see the EBITDA, if you don't see your growth, if you don't see your churn and things like this, you might not optimize globally for the organization. You might optimize locally, and with the risk taken, you will not necessarily perform the most valuable activities as a CTO. Not distinguishing between governance activities and others is challenging and is going to cost the organization. There's no exception to that. It's always that. Working on your pillars, educational pillars, it's a continuous work. So you don't say, I've done this at the beginning and that's fine. You need to always deliver learning pills for your team so that they can learn how else they can protect the company, how they can improve the way they take decisions so that they don't harm the organization. Responsibility can be trained, and we need to take care of the team working together, taking maneuvers together, like business recovery, restoring a system, before actually needing to do this work. And of course, when we change people from a job to another, they are moved from competent to incompetent. And there is a way to do this, there is a better way to do that. They can be trained and prepared before doing that. And if they can't do that, they are not for the job, and that's better. Don't put them in places and then ask them for things to do. It might be not necessarily risky, but they lose, you lose, everyone loses if there is a slightly chance of not being up to the task. Evolve the definition of control to the modern one. Don't forget the WODA loop that we've discussed during the CTO decision making. Very important. That's for you. For the team is something else. Study, check act, plan, study, check act. That could be more interesting. Do act, sorry. Also avoid fixating metrics, the tyranny of metrics, but do measure. And you don't always treat the cause, and that's fine, but be mindful of what you are treating. You need to do things that make sense. And of course, be mindful with the league you're playing in. and be mindful. That is very important. So you have a reference in the deck that can help you to learn a lot from it about mindfulness also. Do your best to move from moderately competent CTO to a fully competent one and leave the job of a CTO, as CTO is a privilege. We've talked about it in every episode, and it will not stop here in the last episode of this season. And whenever you need to work with a team, get stuff done model is helpful, along with teaching the responsibility from Christopher Avery framework. Very useful, both of them. And I think this is it. Is it going to be a new season? We'll see with our partners here. Until then, let's do the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Cornel. So we have a few questions. I'm gonna jump right in and read the first one. So how can a CTO differentiate between genuine progress and vanity metrics that may give a false sense of success in a project?
Well, it depends on what kind of progress. If we talk about features, value delivered to the consumer, attend to the reviews, demos, put your hands in it, and anyway, you will need to trust the team. I don't know if you heard about Yuval Harari, but he defines trust as a key component of our organization, of our society, of our civilization. Humanity cannot work without trust. So this is very important. So we'll need to trust, but you also need to check from time to time. You are the CTO, you are not a product owner, you're not a developer, so don't take the responsibility to do their testing and things like this. But don't be an astronaut neither. So regular pace, anchor to the reality. In terms of technical aspects, things that are less obvious, there are lots of tools out there. But as you saw in this conversation, in this presentation, you might enable them, and in reality, they are disabled at one point in time. Because the team didn't understand, didn't engage with them, didn't work at that level of the responsibility. So you will need to ensure they work at that level of responsibility and that they understand. If not, anyway, my opinion is that you still need these tools, and you look at them, even if the team doesn't look at one point in time. It's just a matter of time until you will have to do something with your team, because that's not going to work on the long term. And also something which is important, but there are many things that we could have said here. In many organizations, there are things that are done isolated and not unified. And this is very wrong, because between the department, between the teams, between the borders, in the borders areas, those are the places where most of the problems come from. So you need to ensure that you have a minimum set of pillars that unify your team. The organizational framework is one of them, like a LESS or something like this, large scale agile something, but that's not everything. Unified testing, for example, is one of the most critical aspects of scalability. If you don't have a global battery of testing, you will not scale. That's not large agile. Then fitness functions. Build your fitness functions so that you monitor, you see how your system is in fit, and those are global features. That you can have local but global. Continuous deploy, that needs to be a unified approach. Not everyone doing everything they want on their same side. Log analytics. And so forth. So you need to have a set of unified things, and if you go through them, you'll see that there are not 2, 3. There are 30 items that you might consider you need them globally. because on your context. And maturity models are quite helpful here, but you need to audit from time to time. You need to review and to ensure that you don't get disillusion. If you are not checking yourself, let others check and do your measurement. Look at the audit reports, and that should also be helpful. So peer reviews and things like this.
Okay, thank you for the answer. One more. Can you provide examples of common pitfalls that CTOs face when relying on data-driven decisions, and how can they ensure that the data being used is accurate?
Well, yeah, it depends on the data. As I said, things that matter the most are the value drivers. That kind of data needs to be as accurate as it can be, and that's very important. Then you have other kinds of data, like you have observability kind of matters. You have the 500 errors, how many of that you have, things like this. And this is interesting because that's mostly automated, so you can look at that. So that's interesting data. And then you have things like that guide you. Like we've done this practice. We call them circumstantial solutions. You cannot link them directly to the performance of the company. So you say, I'm going to do test-driven development because it's going to be better, because you hope it will improve something, and eventually the maturity of the organization, and eventually with an impact on the value drivers. So I'm very skeptic about looking at the data and being tyrannic about it here. But these are things that you need to check from time to time and see how they work. But it says there is something very interesting between science and signal. So there is signal you get, it's important, and sometimes the signal is not on the right path and you need to analyze. And you also get signs like now you need to do something, you need to act. And the same applies on the other way around. You provide signal to your team and say, hey, this too many requests there, something is wrong, and that's signal. And then you have signs like things you really want them to be done, and say now this needs to be solved immediately. So you need to take into account this as well, and the signal is partially based on data. This is the intuition that also nurtures your signal. In reality, you cannot base everything on the data you collect. One last thing about it. I remember the story of Facebook when they redesigned their user experience, and they said there is this metaphor of local optima. The local optima means like you are on a mountain and you optimize until you reach the edge of that mountain. Mm-hmm. But at one point in time, you cannot go further. So you need to change the mountain. So data can tell you if you are on that edge, if you optimized enough, if you optimize that function, but it cannot tell you to change the mountain. So you need both. You need both. The worst case scenario here is to have an extreme approach and say you only data-driven or only intuition-driven. You need both. And it depends on what kind of problem you try to solve. So sometimes you don't need data to go forward. Sometimes you need more data, and you don't want to base on intuition on some stuff. Make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense. Kind of partially answered also the next question. I'm gonna read it anyway. How can a CTO effectively identify the early warning signs of illusion, and what are the most common red flags to look out for?
Yeah, so DORA metrics, for example, was a great tool for that, and it is a great tool for that. And the idea of this presentation was also to give an example where DORA metrics failed. Because in a sense there are metrics and we should treat them as such. So yeah, look at DORA metrics. Look at how easy you can, what's the frequency of delivery, how can you restore the system, how fast you can do that. So that's critical. But also look at other stuff, like are you having an inclusive way of looking at all these aspects? Huh? Are you looking at it from a systematic perspective and so forth? So that's one side of it. Then as a highest level of technology leadership, you need to look at key indicators that move the needle for the company. And that's the area where you should look more. And of course, these indicators don't move when you have a crappy tool. So when you have a crappy solution, at least you might move them a bit, but you will not move them all the time as you wish and with the right speed. You will see that and there are ways to prevent that. So if you're looking at the indicators per industry, like digital business models, look at the Lean Analytics book. You'll find there key indicators per stage of development of your business, startup, and the stage of development. And you will see also based on the digital business model. Like it's a SaaS, it's an e-commerce, it's a mobile app, it's a user-generated kind of content business and things like this. And you can get inspired from it. Don't reinvent that. The people work for you just to use those, and it's a great thing. And technically speaking, use maturity models kind of approach. Use standards that others developed and learned. The entire industry publishes a lot of content, and you don't need to reinvent all that. It's your decision if you go further with an item from the maturity model, but not knowing that this exists, that's a problem. If you don't find, if you cannot say where you stand in an industry, and say from infrastructure and DevOps, I mean good, almost good, or things like this, that's very harmful for your organization, because that's the challenge for CTOs today. And the riskiest aspects on having a CTO who's not anchored in reality and who doesn't know what happens and what should happen. So this is, for example, why we created maturity models, to help CTOs leave something behind. How? Well, don't reinvent everything. Just look at what others think it's good. And if you want it, it's your choice. So this is very important. Standards, maturity models can guide you there, but they cannot guarantee performance. We shouldn't mislead people, because sometimes people say we do this and it will be a success. No. You can work and improve every item from every standard, the maturity models, and your company will fail. That has nothing to do with it. But it can help you not fail miserably. So you need to say, I'm going to use this practice, use this tool, do something here from the maturity models to consolidate something, because the thing that I'm doing has a particular value proposition. It addresses some precise pain points that I have. It's valuable enough. I'm going to solve it. So this is very important. Not following practices just because they are practices. And this is very interesting, because in our world of technology today, technology teams usually follow some sort of practices and over-engineer or over-architect, while the company is in the wrong league and doesn't afford this kind of investments. They needed that energy to survive, to build something valuable for their customers and go further. So having the fit there, it's your decisions as a C leader, CTO, engineering manager also. You can use this kind of tools to position yourself and say, it makes sense, it's valuable enough, we're going to invest. Don't just follow them blindly.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I really like the know your league claim, because it's really important. like long-term thinking. It's a critical thing to do, but far too often it's way longer term than it should be for implementing things within a company.
And of course, there's something more about it, because it's not just the maturity models. Those are things that in terms of practices, engineering and things like this, but there are also which are fundamental. The amount of budget, for example, that's a strategic aspect. What can you afford? Are you, for example, going to do infrastructure as a service in terms of your cloud because you seek for the widest range of flexibility? You're seeking for flexibility and that's strategic for your company, or you are going to do more, even less containers, just serverless or platform as a service, because that's the league you're playing, and you don't have the means to do all this right, and you will do things less from this perspective, just to ensure you're putting your energy where it makes sense. And too often, even developers, solution architects, when you talk with them about low-code, artificial intelligence, but things which are out of the box that you can leverage immediately, they will not necessarily immediately embrace them, because that's less flexibility for them. But the company needs this tooling to prove they have a point, to prove they have a business model, to prove they can have a market fit, and so forth. And maybe with time, when new scenarios come, when something more sophisticated arises as a business case, those things will be refactored. Don't love your solution. It needs just to make sense for the company. And we shouldn't be reluctant to that. We are there to provide solutions that make sense for the particular business, not to change the business because we only know something.
Totally agree on that. Yeah, very, very well pointed out. So we have our last question. In what ways can a CTO create a culture of accountability and ownership to minimize the chances of either deception or illusion?
Well, the first things first. There are some things related to the values that the leadership style of the CTO needs to embody. If you are a satiric, if you usually game the system, if you make jokes about rules and things like this, that's what will happen in your organization. So it's very important to, of course, we can do jokes, but there are things which are very serious. We don't joke about. So you need a very limited set of things, decisions and pillars that help you. They say, this is what needs to be done. This is the direction. This is how we are going to do it. And people will fill in. And these are very critical. They are not optional. So this is very important. What's mandatory, what's optional? If not, that can be quite difficult. Whatever you do, you will not have the right footprint on the culture. Second, in the CTO decision making, there was this pyramid with the decisions, and at the highest level, there was something. I'm looking at the slide because I've used it here also. I've used it here also. I think it would be helpful to show it. This slide, resume slides. From current slide. 1 second. I'm getting back to it.
Sure, no worries.
do you see my pyramid?
Yes.
So there was this side where we were saying values are a consequence. I hope everyone sees this. So if you want to have a cultural impact as a CTO, don't talk about values. Be conscious about your values, your inner values. Observe the environment, but don't talk about them, because people will get frustrated. It's like saying, I have values, you don't have values. Change the decision-making process. For example, there are 5 people in a committee that take all the decision. If that doesn't work, you don't find it, fire those people, put them do other kind of jobs, do something else. They might be at the highest incompetent level, and they need something else as a job. Change the decision-making process. That's it. And you will have immediate impact on the culture. Everything will change, behaviors, everything. But if you don't have the courage to do that, if you don't go at that level, you will not have a cultural change. And you will stay there for years and very few things will change. So if something that is dramatically to be improved, change the decision-making process at the highest level of the organization. That's the best way to do it. I haven't seen any other way. And again, every time we talk about culture and that we don't have the right culture and things like this, without exception, things get more rigid and the culture evolves even less, and at least not in our direction.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay,
so,
then.
As I see, there are no more questions to be handled. Cornel, thank you very much for leading us through this and giving these insights. And with this, we conclude the CTO Fundamentals 2 season as well. As we said, as Cornel said earlier, there may be another season, but it isn't planned yet. So we'll have to see.
Yes, so we have topics for that already collected, but we need to see how things will be conducted later. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with us. Remember, these recordings are going to be live then. So hopefully there will be a new season soon, and you will enjoy it also. Have a nice day, nice week, and a nice summer.
Thank you very much, Cornel. Have a great
Bye-bye.
day ahead. Bye.